Hello and welcome to another in our series of webinars. I'm Mark Webb and today I'm joined by Harriet Riggall from our team at WebbPaton. Previously, we've looked at the agricultural transition process and the opportunities provided by ELMS and other schemes that will replace BPS beyond 2027. There's a huge amount of change afoot, and from experience, we know not everyone will have the appetite to keep up with it all and make the necessary changes to stay afloat. In some cases, the numbers just won't stack up. Perhaps you run a small marginal grassland farm and the replacement schemes aren't quite the right fit for the farm, as has been the case with countryside stewardship, which has many more arable options. Or perhaps you have already been thinking of an exit strategy from farming and now seems as good an opportunity as any to put those plans in motion. This week, we thought it would be useful to look at the alternatives in terms of farming arrangements and some changes you might consider making to your business structure in order to overcome, or at least mitigate, the challenges following our exit from the EU. Harriet is going to run through the various options and will discuss how they operate in practice, together with any practical benefits and considerations that need to be made. So Harriet, what are my choices?
Well, it could simply be a case of joining forces with a neighbour and pooling your resources, mainly machinery, but also labour and maybe even buildings for crop storage or livestock and selling produce together. This might be the ideal setup if you don't want to give up farming, but just do a bit less.
So what are the benefits?
Well, it allows the parties to continue farming and trading in their own right, claiming BPS and stewardship on their own land. And at busy times, there's the advantage of shared extra labour, and you may also benefit from one another's knowledge and enthusiasm. Pooling your machinery and selling any surplus may give an opportunity to raise some capital. And if one party has, say, a modern grain store, this could free up buildings for alternative non-farming uses.
So Harriet, one concern we regularly hear, though, is a worry about who gets to use the combine or the sprayer first.
Well, my answer to that would be that modern machinery is big, it's efficient, and it covers the ground quickly. So I really wouldn't let that put you off.
Well, what about something for new entrants, or perhaps those who don't currently have much kit or land to farm?
Well, a share farming joint venture could be a good option here. This is where the farmer puts in the land and some inputs, and the sharer contributes machinery and labour, etc. And each party then gets a share or percentage of the crop grown, as an example. Now, it's about joint decisions and risk-taking, so each party is as invested as the other. This would be particularly good for a new entrant who can, over time, and with a successful arrangement, increase their proportion of ownership, such as the proportion of the herd or flock owned between the parties.
Okay, Harriet, so how does a share farming agreement differ from a stubble-to-stubble contract farming arrangement?
Well, this is similar to share farming, whereby the farmer engages a contractor who typically provides machinery and labour, and the farmer owns and sells the crop. Costs to the farmer include input costs and the contractor's fee. And from the leftover money, the farmer's first charge is then taken, followed by any profit split between the parties.
So what sort of numbers are we talking about?
Well, for cereal growing, a typical contractor's charge would be in the region of £120 per acre. Now, assuming that there is a profit, the farmer's first charge could be anything from £0 to £50 an acre, depending on things like soil type and the availability of grain storage on the farm. Any surplus is then split, often 50-50, between the parties.
So how would the basic payment normally be treated?
Well, generally speaking, BPS and stewardship monies are kept out of the pot and retained by the farmer.
And what else should I be thinking about, Harriet?
Well, you'd need to think about land management, such as hedge cutting and stewardship options. Who does this work? And also meeting the cost of crop drying and storage. And any financial losses will be felt by the farmer, as he is the one who needs to be seen to be taking risk. So unlike share farming, the financial risk is not shared. Also, management decisions need to be made by the farmer and noted as such in quarterly meeting minutes. but very often the farmer can benefit from the knowledge of the contractor in making his decisions.
So are you saying I should become a contractor to others, or I should get a contractor to run my farm?
Well, it's up to you to decide if you want to take a step back and become the farmer, or a step forward and look for opportunities to become a contractor to others. For example, as the farmer, a contract farming agreement could provide an opportunity to sell machinery and inject some cash into the business, or pay off some borrowing. But whatever you decide, it is very important to have the contract agreed in writing.
So is a contract farming agreement suitable for all farm types?
We generally talk about contract farming agreements in the context of arable farms, but this arrangement works for livestock farming as well. For example, we run contract farming agreements on dairy farms.
So if I get a contractor in, one saving would be that I would need less staff. Presumably, I just make them redundant.
Well, there's a cost saving to be made here, but this is not a simple area. Firstly, it's the position that becomes redundant, not the staff. For example, if the work they do is continuing but being done by a contractor, then it's highly likely that their position is not redundant. This situation has solutions, but I strongly recommend that you don't do anything without taking professional advice, as it's very easy to end up with an expensive unfair dismissal claim.
Okay, Harriet, so what's your view on the more traditional farm business tenancy approach?
Well, entering into an FBT enables a farming business to fully relinquish control of the land. As I'm sure you're aware, under an FBT, the tenant has exclusive occupation, BPS and stewardship incomes are payable to the tenant, and a fixed rent is paid back to the landowner for an agreed period of time.
So how do you think rents will be affected by the phasing out of basic payment?
Well, I think that rents are inevitably going to have to come down to take into account the loss of income. On some arable and stock farms, this loss could be as much as 15% of the total turnover, so not an insignificant amount. It's also worth mentioning here that grazing licenses are another means of managing the land, but not exclusively. Now, this could be considered as an alternative to a tenancy and would allow the landowner to make full use of stewardship schemes. And any surplus farm buildings could be made available for alternative uses, such as commercial or residential. But as with all of the above, you must have agreements in place and ensure that the land is properly managed. And be mindful that this is not an option for tenants who are not normally permitted to sublet.
So how do all of the options you've mentioned compare for inheritance tax?
Well, the basic rule encompasses all of the options. The land must be owned and farmed by an active farmer for 2 years in hand, or let out for 7 years, before 100% agricultural property relief, or APR, is achievable. Of course, these agreements will have long-term consequences, so tax and inheritance planning should be a key consideration when making your decision. And there are practical considerations that need to be made too. For example, if your property is contract farmed and you intend to claim agricultural property relief on the farmhouse from which the business is run, then all contract farming meetings must take place at the property.
Thank you, Harriet. That's been very helpful. Could you just summarise maybe some of the key points?
Yes, well, it's clear that each of the options we've discussed offers a varying degree of input and risk-taking. So it really depends on how involved you want to be and what you would do with your so-called free time. Now think carefully about who you are entering into an agreement with. A joint venture requires the parties to trust one another in order for the setup to work and be successful. And putting a formal written agreement in place is essential, documenting what has been agreed. But in order to fully understand and consider the implications of business changes, and to ensure any written document is completely watertight and achieves your objectives, it is important to seek professional advice, and WebbPaton would be very happy to help.
Harriet, thank you. We hope you found this useful. Other members of WebbPaton's team will be back soon to cover a different topic. Goodbye.